right, at this time we'll go ahead and transition to our classes. It's good to see everybody out once again. We appreciate you all being here. I appreciate RE bringing up that Love Our Neighbors list. We've got to make sure we keep that updated and keep those folks at the forefront of our minds on our personal prayer list, as well as the ones that we're going to be praying for as a congregation as a whole. And we've already seen the fruits of that. So we want to make sure we keep that up and keep that at the forefront of our mind. And it's interesting that that's brought up, because we're looking at the second big prayer of intercession in the Scripture. Now, we looked at Abraham's prayer of intercession for Lot and his family back in Genesis, and that was interesting. God did deliver, right? Abraham goes before God, and there's this dialogue back and forth. What if there's 50? What if there's 40, 30, all the way down to 10? And then Lot's family would be the only ones that would be spared, but with the note that obedience would be required. Remember Lot's wife. Obedience wasn't at the forefront of her mind. It might have been at one point, but she faded away. She turned around, and she was turned into salt. I almost made a bad joke about table salt there, but I'm going to save that one. We're not going to do that one tonight. Let's turn to Exodus 32. We'll just turn on over there. Exodus 32 is where we'll be. We've been looking at the Exodus narrative, right? Moses goes before Pharaoh, and he has conversations with God back and forth. Moses has some doubts about his own ability, but God reminds Moses, and we should remind ourselves, that our own strength doesn't come from us, it comes from God, and what God can do through us. That's what Moses had to be reminded of, and luckily he had Aaron to help him along the way. But by the time we get to Exodus 32, they have been delivered, right? They've seen what mighty things God can do. He has delivered them from the hand of the Egyptians, and at this time, Moses is going up on the mountain. He's going up on the mountain to receive the 10 Commandments. Right there at the end of verse 30 of chapter 31, really just a quick summary of chapter 31, the Lord said that He has gifted these certain men to help with the construction of the tabernacle, with the ark, with all the furniture that would go into these places, and He had given them the unique ability to carry out these tasks. It even says that He had given them their spirit there in verse 2, I believe. Verse 3, I have filled him with the Spirit of God in wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, and in all kinds of craftsmanship. And he gets into that. Later on, he gets into the idea of the sign of the Sabbath, right? And the importance that the Sabbath would have in their relationship with God. And then finally, right there at the end of it, verse 18, when he had finished speaking with him on Mount Sinai, he gave Moses the 2 tablets of the testimony, tablets of stone, written by the finger of God. Now that's important, we know, because of what would happen later, that this was written by God, because Moses would have to do something because of his anger. We'll get to that here later on, but that brings us to where we will be tonight in chapter 32. Now there'll be a little bit of reading before we start getting into some context and looking at things, but just bear with me through some of this reading, and we'll break some of this down. Chapter 32. Now when the people saw that Moses delayed to come down from the mountain, the people assembled around Aaron and said to him, Come and make us a god who will go before us. For this Moses, the man who has brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we don't know what happened to him. Aaron said to them, Tear off the gold rings that are on the ears of your wives, your sons, your daughters, and bring them to me. So the people tore off the gold rings which were in their ears and brought them to Aaron. Then he took the gold from their hands and fashioned it with an engraving tool, and he made it into a cast metal calf. And they said, This is your God, Israel, who brought you up from the land of Egypt. Now when Aaron saw this, he built an altar in front of it, and Aaron made a proclamation and said, Tomorrow shall be a feast to the Lord. Let's make a couple notes here, what we see early on. Anybody else have, this is New American Standard that I'm reading from, but other translations will translate the word God there in verse number 2 or 3, I believe. Somewhere in those verses, it'll translate it as gods. Does anybody have that? Yeah. The people seem to be very confused in this passage. It's my personal belief. If you go back and look at the Hebrew, I do think gods is a more accurate representation of what was being said there. Now, New American Standard cleans it up, and I think the reason for that is because Aaron is going to come back, and Aaron is now keep in mind, he's like a mediator between the people at this point. Moses is on the mountain. Aaron is having to deal with all of these people who are coming to him with these demands. It seems to me, and I hope this isn't reaching, it seems to me that Aaron is kind of making concession for the people here, right? He's giving a little bit because he comes back and he makes the proclamation there at the end that this will be for the Lord, and that is the word for the one God. It's like he's trying to keep the people happy, but at the same time he is trying to juggle too many things at once. And so we see a big problem with that. I think that the people most likely were influenced by what they saw in Egypt. All kinds of gods, all sorts of different gods, to the sun, to the festivals that they did, all of these different things to appease these different gods, and it most likely rubbed off on the people. They're requesting gods, and he gives them a little g God, but he makes the note here that it's supposed to represent the one true God. Now, there's only one problem with that, right? God doesn't want to be represented that way. He can't be conformed to a small image or a building where his presence may be or things like that. God is bigger than that. And it's against what God wanted specifically. So, there's lessons we can learn and application we can make from this. There's many people out there today that are super sincere in their faith. And they may even, try and appease the one God. But they're trying to do it in a way that's not pleasing to him. They're trying to do it in a way that it really is not what God had asked for, and so they're no closer. We're going to see that for certain here in this passage. They're no closer to serving God than those who don't even know Him. That can be a harsh truth for people, but I think it's something that they need to understand. So he goes about doing this, and there in verse number 5, now when Aaron saw this, he built an altar in front of it, and Aaron made a proclamation and said, "Tomorrow shall be a feast to the Lord." So the next day they got up early and offered burnt offerings and brought peace offerings. And the people sat down to eat and drink and got up to engage in lewd behavior. That's interesting there, isn't it? The people's hearts were still far from God at this point. And then Moses, we'll get into verse 7. We see a little bit of a transition there. Any thoughts on those first 6 verses? I know it doesn't have too much to do with what we're going to dig into. But I do think it was interesting notes looking at the difference between God and gods there and what Aaron ended up doing for the people. Any thoughts or comments on that?
I think it sounds a little, I don't know, it's a little confusing. Verse 2 and 3, Aaron's taken all the gold rings and everything, and then in verse 4, Aaron does the engraving tool and makes it into the metal calf. Who are the they? And then they said, "This is your God." Aaron did all the work, but who's coming back and saying, "This is your God"?
So the commentators make the claim that it might be partly the elders. Now we mentioned that last week, and Paul had, I think, even brought up the fact that the elders were some of the ones whenever Moses was going before Pharaoh and coming back, he would be discussing it with them. I think it's entirely possible that might be at least part of who this is. They're supposed to be the spiritual leaders for the people now. They have failed them. But I think that it could be the elders.
In verse 5, now when Aaron saw this, it's like, almost gives you the feeling that Aaron didn't know anything about this until he saw it. And he's building the altar. So it's a little strange.
It's strange.
Aaron's doing all this, but then he's also acting like he didn't know anything about it.
It's almost like the blame game, right? It almost seems as if the blame game here is going on. Any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, Moses hadn't come back with the tablets yet, right?
Not yet.
So they don't know about the commandment, "Thou shalt have no other gods before I." No.
Well, it's interesting because they still have the idea of God, and there's many who were following him through that. It says, when we look back at the narrative of when they were still in Egypt, they knew God. Now they had been greatly influenced by their culture, is the thing. And so I think that there has been a really big falling away, or at least in the true sense of following God. And of course, they're going to have to be brought back. And we're going to see some of that through Moses' prayer. Paul, what do you have?
I was thinking about when they had Laban had come after Jacob, and he's upset because he's taken his daughter and his grandson. but when he comes into the tent, he's actually saying, "You stole my gods." And if we'll remember, she is sitting upon the chest or the bed that has them hidden there.
Oh, yes.
And Jacob doesn't know anything about it. But I'm thinking these gods are these figurines, these carvings, these handheld, it's not necessarily something that would be large all the time. Now this one may have been. But this idea of something that represents God. So even though we know God did not want that, he says you don't shape anything that's an animal or anything like that to represent him. But at this point, it looks like that's what they've done.
It's interesting that people yearn for a God. Like they're yearning for something greater than themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And, oftentimes it's misplaced, but it's good to know that there's people searching at the same time.
And I think she's right. They want to see something.
Yes.
And although they saw the pillar of fire and they had the cloud, that part, it's even later, they want a king. Just like everybody else has a king. They want somebody they can see, somebody they can talk to. I think they want this God that they can actually see or have something represented that, and we have to have faith. There is a God.
And also that idea wouldn't cease, would it? Isn't that what Jesus had to deal with? And Jesus would tell Thomas, whenever there was the matter of faith, blessed are those who believe and haven't seen. Right? Thomas got to see that. The disciples got to see Jesus in the flesh. While we don't get to see those things, we still have faith. We still have faith that those things were true, and we believe that fully. But as people, it's almost a part of human nature that there's something that we want to be able to perceive, right? Something we can see, we can feel, we can touch. We want that. And we see the people wanting that here, and that's a great parallel with the kings. Lord, we want to be like everybody else. They have somebody who's the figure of their faith or their heritage or who they are, and they want to have that as well. So very good stuff so far.
And remember, they were enslaved for the 400 years too, so they have this freedom now. They don't know what to do with themselves.
They don't know what to do with themselves. Absolutely. That's a great thought as well. Anything else before we move on? We're going to start getting into kind of some of the meat of this tonight. If not, let's go on. If you think of something, we can come back to it. Verse 7, Then the Lord spoke to Moses, Go down at once, for your people whom you brought up out of the land of Egypt have behaved corruptly. They have quickly turned aside from the way which I commanded them. They have made themselves a cast metal calf, and have worshipped it, and have sacrificed to it, and said, This is your God, Israel, who has brought you up from the land of Egypt. Then the Lord said to Moses, I have seen this people, and behold, they are an obstinate people. So now leave me alone, that my anger may burn against them, and that I may destroy them, and I will make of you a great nation. Okay, so we went from 0 to 100 really quick here, didn't we? God's anger is kindled against them because of what they've done. And what is it that God says here? He's going to destroy them. He's going to wipe them out. And we've talked about this before many times when we've seen, great figures of faith. We've looked at Abraham. We can go back and see many others throughout the Scripture. But God's going to find a way if we cooperate or not. I'll rise up stones to do these things. All kinds of statements like that. God's going to find a way for His will to be accomplished. But I think it's interesting how Moses goes about this. Paul?
We have two different things that we have this response from Moses that we're going to see in a moment. But I find it interesting that the Lord says to Moses, I have seen this people, and, well, let's go back to verse 8. And it says, Israel who brought, I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong place. I'm trying to find out, my wife is moving the phone. Okay. It starts out saying that you brought them out. This is your people. God's saying to Moses, this is your people. You brought them out. And then Moses says to God, no, he doesn't say no. He says, it's your people. You brought them out. So this is, and this is where Moses says, don't destroy them. They're your people. You brought them out, you know. And then he goes on with this narrative. But when God speaks to Moses, he doesn't say they're my people that I brought out. He says they're your people that you brought out. And it's interesting that
That is.
we see that.
That is really interesting. And also that there in verse 8, what you mentioned quickly there was maybe partly the answer of our question. It says they had quickly turned aside from the way which I commanded them. So it's obvious that God had given them some amount of instruction about what they were supposed to be doing. They had some knowledge at least. Now we don't know how limited or that was, but it's obvious that they were told that they shouldn't have been doing what they did there in verse 8. That kind of answers something that we had just mentioned a few moments ago. But yeah, I mean, there's some very interesting language used here, and with these people and my people, they are an obstinate people. Leave me alone there in verse 10, that my anger may burn against them, that I may destroy them. And notice what God says to Moses here. I almost said Abraham, because it kind of reminds you of that, doesn't it? He says that I will make you a great nation. In this moment, God would have been fully content to wipe the people out and to rise up a new nation from Moses. And you want to think about the implications of this? I mean, and guys, this gives us a glimpse into who Moses was, by the way. How much of us, how many of us would be tempted if God said, I'm going to make something great out of you. I will raise you up. To think back, I mean, we know even to this point, Moses' dealings with the people, they weren't that smooth, were they? I mean, they were questioning Moses at every turn. Moses, I mean, if he wasn't, set in a firm foundation of faith, wouldn't it have been really tempting for Moses to say, you know what? Let's just wipe them out. I'll do something with myself. I can make myself great. You can elevate me. It can be all about me. But that's not what Moses does, is it? Let's get back to it. Let's see what Moses does here in this moment.
Spencer.
Yes.
So I think also, what we can see in this is type and shadow.
Yes.
Foreshadowing, definitely, because Moses, I'm going to say Abraham, Moses is acting, he's the mediator right now. And so we have a mediator. And why do we need one? Well, why did the people of Israel at this time, or these
Sin.
why do they need a mediator to go between, say, we have Jesus right now doing that for us. We are just as unworthy as these individuals are for what we do. Look at what we worship today. Look what we build for ourselves. Look what we put our trust in, and don't go to God. And then what is Jesus doing for us? Moses is doing the same thing.
Absolutely. So you want to talk about types and shadows, typology. Moses is a type of Christ in this situation. Now, it's going to be expanded upon when we get to verse 32. Now, hold your horses. We're not going to go there yet, but we're going to get there. And that is a great comment. We're going to get to some of those things. Notice Moses' plea, guys, here in verse 11. Then Moses pleaded with the Lord, his God, saying, Lord, why does your anger burn against, here's what Paul mentioned, your people, there in verse 11, whom you have brought out from the land of Egypt with great power and with a mighty hand? And then he asked the Lord a question here in verse number 12. Why should the Egyptians talk, saying, with evil motives he brought them out to kill them on the mountain and destroy them from the face of the earth? Turn from your burning anger and relent of doing harm to your people. So, actually, let me go ahead and read a little bit more, and we'll come back and make some comments. Remember Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, your servants, to whom you swore by yourself and said to them, I'll multiply your descendants as the stars of the heavens, and all of the land which I have spoken and given to you, I will give to your descendants, and they shall inherit it forever. So the Lord relented, said that he would do to the people. This is just very interesting right here. Paul, I know you got something.
Well, if we go to, I guess it's in Matthew chapter 3 and verse 9, we have this conversation that the Jews are having with Jesus and saying, we have Father Abraham, he's our father. And Jesus says, I tell you, out of these stones, God could raise up the children for Abraham. So even if he destroyed them, he could still, even out of the stones on the ground, make a nation if he chose to.
Absolutely. We see the power of God in this. But notice how the manner here that Moses goes before God, you know, he first approaches him, and let me see, I made a couple notes here, places I wanted to go to talk about this. I don't know if we'll be able to for time's sake. But, you know, why should the Egyptians say with evil intent they brought him out of the land there in verse 12? You know, Moses isn't concerned about himself here, in other words. He's concerned with God's reputation. What will the Egyptians say if they see that, oh, well, these people have been escaped and they've done it by the hand of God? We've seen the miracles, and yet God didn't deliver them here. He destroyed them. He's worried about God's reputation. Moses isn't worried about himself here, and so he approaches God in a way that magnifies his name. He says many things here in this passage. What is it? You have brought them out of Egypt by your power with your mighty hand. It seems very similar to how Jesus instructs us on prayer, Matthew chapter 6, verse number 9, where he says, hallowed be your name, right? When we come before God, we're bringing praise unto him, glory to his name. That's a proper way to pray. And so Moses begins this conversation with God, and I know, as we've mentioned, you know, some of these conversations with God, they're direct conversations. It's back and forth. It's not like how our prayer is, but at the same time, don't we see that level of reverence and respect towards God coming through in this? Lord, I'm worried about this, and I'm coming before you out of humility and understanding that you're great and I am nothing. That's the attitude we see of Moses here, and he's worried about the relationship with God. It's very similar to, one second, Paul, very similar to 2 Samuel 7. We're not going to go there for time's sake, but if you're taking notes, 2 Samuel chapter 7, verse 25, David prays to the Lord, do as you have spoken. This is the same type of prayer. Remember the things that you have promised. And he calls back to Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, or Jacob, in this passage. He's calling him back. Lord, remember those things. You made those promises. Paul, what'd you have? Sorry.
You mentioned the relationship. We have this conversation that God has with Miriam and Aaron later. He says, I speak with Moses like a friend. He's like a friend. I speak to him face to face. Others I'm speaking to in visions, but Moses, I speak to him like a friend. So it's a different relationship, this idea of going back and forth. There's something special there that's not, I mean, nobody else had that.
Also, I'll say this, as much credit as Abraham gets, I hope Moses is hearing me right now, because Moses needs a lot of credit, right? Moses deserves a lot of credit. And we oftentimes talk about Abraham, and rightfully so, but Moses was a great man of faith. I mean, in the comments, even God makes about him that you mentioned, I mean, we see Moses' character. Greg?
Moses does get a lot of credit because of the character he had. I just don't understand, because when he was talking with God, as he was on his way down the mountain, he and God were still talking. But when Moses got to where the people were, and he seen what they were doing and what was going on, his anger burned too.
Yes, once we get to verse 19, he was angry, and we know he would, slam down those tablets in anger. And it's similar, God told him what was coming, and that's not the first time we've seen that, right? Remember when we looked at last week and the week before, whenever Moses was going to go in and have the conversation with Pharaoh, God said, it's not going to go your way the first time. He told him exactly how it was going to go. And Moses still had doubts even after that. Well, God tells Moses here in this that, hey, what the people are doing before Moses even sees it. John?
We ought to keep in mind, too, that it took over 80 years for Moses to get this relationship. God almost killed him one time in the second 40 years of his life. So it took a while for Moses to get this relationship.
Absolutely. And so, the timeline of Moses and, God making him what he was and preparing him for this, I mean, it's just incredible to see. So, let's continue. I don't know, it's 7:15. And I'm really thinking now that we've had a lot of good comments, I don't want to get to the end here of this, because, let's see, we're going to get to, well, let's just do it really quickly anyway. Let's just go ahead and read through. We'll skip down to verse 19. This is what Greg was talking about. And it came about as soon as Moses approached the camp that he saw the calf and the people dancing, and Moses' anger burned. And he threw the tablets from his hands and shattered them into the pieces at the foot of the mountain. Then he took the calf which they had made and completely burned it with fire and ground it to powder and scattered it over the surface of the water and made the sons of Israel drink it. That's pretty angry. That is very angry right there, right? And so then Moses said to Aaron, "What did this people do to you, that you have brought such a great sin upon them?" Moses knows where the responsibility lied, right? Aaron was supposed to be watching the people. He was supposed to be doing his part, and he bent his will to what the people wanted to do. "What did the people do to you, that you have brought such a great sin upon them?" And Aaron said, "Do not let the anger of the Lord burn. You know the people yourself. They are prone to evil." This is kind of funny, by the way. You know what this reminds me of? Doesn't this remind you of Adam? Doesn't this remind you of Adam? Oh, the woman. The woman made me do it. Aaron, you know how these people are. But Aaron, he should have been a better leader in this situation as well. Let's go down. Aaron tells, he retells it here. "For they said to me," verse 23, "Make a God for us who will go out before us. For this Moses, the man who has brought us from the land of Egypt, we do not know what happened to him." So he said to them, "Whoever has any gold, let him tear it off, give it to me, throw it in the fire," and out came this calf. Just popped right out of there, didn't it? Aaron's a good storyteller. This part really, this is really funny to me. "And out came this calf. Now when Moses saw that the people were out of control, for Aaron had let them get out of control to the point of being an object of ridicule among their enemies, Moses then stood at the gate of the camp and said, 'Whoever is for the Lord, come to me.' And all the sons of Levi gathered together to him, and he said to them, 'This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Every man of you put his sword on his thigh and go back and forth to the gate in the camp, and kill every man and his brother, and every man his friend, and every man his neighbor.' So the sons of Levi did as Moses instructed, and about 3,000 men of the people fell that day. Then Moses said, 'Dedicate yourselves today to the Lord. For every man has been against his son and against his brother, in order that he may bestow a blessing upon you today.' And on the next day Moses said to the people, 'You yourselves have committed a great sin. And now I'm going to go up to the Lord. Perhaps I can make atonement for your sin.' Then Moses returned to the Lord." This is it right here. This is the big part. "Oh, so this people has committed a great sin, and they have made a god of gold for themselves." Verse 32. "But now, if you will, forgive their sin. Very well. But if not, please wipe me out from your book which you have written." Wow. We see the heart of Moses right there. "Lord, forgive them. But if you can't forgive them, give me the punishment. I'll take it. Remove me." That's the heart of Moses. And that's why we talk about the typology. Just as we need an intercessor in Jesus Christ, that's what Moses does for the people here. He goes before God. He tells him, "God, forgive them, please." He begs with him. He pleads with him. "But if you can't do it, just punish me." However, the Lord said to Moses, "Whoever has sinned against me, I will wipe him out of my book. But go now, lead the people where I told you. Behold, my angel shall go before you. Nevertheless, on the day I will punish them for their sins." Then the Lord struck the people with a plague because of what they did with the calf which Aaron had made. It's interesting there because there's the clarifier, right? The calf which Aaron had made. It kind of clears up a little bit of the funny business of what we have been reading earlier on, where there was the blame game. He did it, she did it, with Aaron and those elders potentially who were around, who should have been role models but weren't. But this is just a incredible passage, isn't it, where we see Moses going before the Lord and making this intercession. Any thoughts on that before we close?
I have a question.
Okay.
Verse 17. "Then when Joshua heard the sound of the people as they shouted, he said to Moses," where did Joshua come into this whole thing? He just kind of jumped in there out of nowhere.
He's up on the mountain.
He was waiting
Yes. And we get clarification on that back in, well, I'll have to find it. I'll have it for next week.
Okay, that was.
Paul, you got the timer? Okay.
Yeah, all of a sudden, just Joshua had not even been mentioned, and then all of a sudden Joshua's here.
It's easy to remember that passage because it's Exodus 32:32.
Yes. Yeah, it'll stick with you, and you know, anytime we need a reminder of that intercession that we have, we should go back here and look at what Moses did. It's very interesting, this prayer. I'll make this comment before we close. It's a very balanced prayer. We call it a prayer, but it's a conversation Moses is having with God. It's a prayer for justice, right, but also for mercy. Moses isn't saying that the people shouldn't be punished. He's not saying that at all. And that's clarified, right, because the Lord said that He would punish them and He would do these things, and it gives the clarifier later on that He would send the plague among them. But He is asking for mercy, but also for justice. We can't forget that part of it. Moses was not asking for a blank slate. So when we go before God, you know, maybe it would be beneficial to have this same attitude. Lord, I know that there's still, how do you say it? I know that there's still consequences, right? There's still consequences for sin. There's still consequences for actions that we might do on this earth. We can still have forgiveness of those, but we got to make sure we're asking for it in the right manner. If I go and commit a crime, right, and I pray to God, Lord, forgive me, the Lord will forgive me, but what am I probably still going to have to do? Is He going to take my prison sentence away? He wouldn't be just then, would He? He is a just God. He deals with things in accordance to His will, and He's not a respecter of persons, which we could get into that conversation as well. Paul, I saw you had something.
I was thinking even Moses, he's about going to the promised land. The people are going in. God doesn't let him go in, and he pleads with God, and eventually God says, enough. No. And we then, so Moses doesn't get to go. He is also punished for his sin.
Mm-hmm.
There's consequences for his sin.
So we're going to look at that next week. And we're also going to look at Moses' plead for God's presence with them to go into Canaan, and that's Exodus 33. And we'll go back and we may make a couple more comments about what we've looked at today. I'm sure we will, because we need to. But any other closing comments? And Tucker, would you pick out an invitation song?
870.
870 will be our invitation song tonight. Any other comments?
Spencer,
Yes.
you go back to chapter 24, verse 13. That shows you where Joshua comes in.
Okay, there's our answer. Exodus 24:13, you said, shows us where Joshua comes into the picture. And I'll just read that for us really quickly. So Moses got up along with Joshua, his servant, and Moses went up on the mountain of God. So I don't know how far, and it may get into that. I can't remember off the top of my head how far Joshua goes up, if there's a point where Joshua goes up and Moses continues his journey. I believe that's the case, but I'd have to go back and look at it. But Joshua does go with him on this, and that's significant because we talked about how God was shaping Moses for all these years. What's He doing with Joshua? Don't you see how things are continuing to happen for the people to continue to have the things that they need going forward? God's always working on people. He's working on you and He's working on me. He does it through His Word, right? As we are listening to it, living by it, He is working on us, sanctifying us, as we can read in the New Testament. All right. Tonight, we have another opportunity to have an invitation. We always like to offer the invitation, but I do want to say this. The invitation is always open, right? It's not just a time where we can come forward and we can confess things or we can ask for prayers for things we've been struggling with. The invitation is always open. You can call me at 2 a.m. I don't know if I'll call you back until I wake up. I don't know if I will. But the family of God, we love each other. And we want to be there for each other. And that's exactly what we're called to do. Bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ, Galatians chapter 6. That's what we're supposed to do. So tonight's just another opportunity to do that. And it continues all throughout the rest of this week, next week, and as long as we'll be here on this earth. We have an opportunity to help each other and to help each other get to heaven. So tonight, I don't know what your struggle is. I don't know if you're going through a difficulty in your life with a health crisis. I don't know if it's something internally, maybe depression, anxiety, something that is dragging you down. I don't know what it is. But regardless of those things, God is bigger than them. We know that. And as we've read about these things tonight. And thankfully, we have even a greater intercessor than Moses. The great high priest, Jesus Christ, who will intercede for us, who will help us, and who will draw us close to the Father. Tonight, if there's anything we can help you with, please consider coming as we stand and sing this song together.
Why keep Jesus waiting, waiting?